Hey, hello, and welcome to the Content Advantage, a talk show about content for content professionals, folks like you. I'm Scott Abel, and with me today is my co-host, Tom Deschamps. Hey, Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Scott. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I know that you are filling in for my usual co-host, so people who watch the show on a regular basis might wonder, where is Megan Gilhooly? Could you give us a little update on who you are and why you're here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Tom Beauchamp. I work with Megan actually at Zoom In Software, and so
Awesome.
I'm a customer success manager there.
Excellent, thank you. If you'll welcome our guest, we'll take this show on the road and get it going.
Absolutely. So, I'm very excited to do so. I want to invite user experience and content strategy expert Colleen Jones. Colleen, welcome to the Content Advantage.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. Well, Colleen, thanks for joining us. Before we get into the topic of today's show, I wonder if you would tell the audience just a little bit about who you are, kind of what your connection is to this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I am the founder of Content Science and the author of a book very aptly named The Content Advantage. And I am really passionate about this topic of content analytics because I find it is more and more important to making good decisions about content, you know, at the strategy level, at the experience level, at, you know, a very detailed tactical level. And I'm really excited about helping, you know, especially content professionals make better use of these kinds of analytics.
Excellent. Well, Colleen, I am confident that there are people on the call today who are waiting for your sound advice on how to do those things. So before we start the show, let me tell some of the folks who are perhaps new to our platform a few things. First, the show is being recorded, which means that you can come back to the same URL that you're using to watch this live presentation and watch a copy of it, a recording, at any time that you'd like. Just wait about 30 minutes after the show's over, and you can return to the same URL. You can also share that URL with other people so that they can watch the show, and we'd hope that you will. You can also ask a question at any time of Colleen by clicking the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. It'll pop up in a little text-based chat window. It's not two-way, but you can send a message our way, and I'll queue them up and ask Colleen as many of the questions as possible with the time that we have on today's show. There's also some additional content located in the attachments and links section of your webinar viewing panel, where you can access content provided by both the sponsor of today's show, Zoom In Software, and also our guest, Colleen Jones. On the way out, I'll ask you to give us a 1 through 5-star rating. 5 is a high star rating. There's also a little field to explain why you gave us the rating that you did. All right, I'm going to pass the microphone to Tom. But before we do, I want to hear a little bit about Tom's experience and why we selected him to fill in for Megan Gilhooly. Tom, tell us briefly about your responsibilities and connection to Zoom In.
Absolutely. So I am, like I said just a little bit ago, a customer success manager there. And what that means for me and for the customers I support is I act as really a trusted advisor, I think, for larger enterprises who use the Zoom In software. I provide some advice on content strategy and how to use the product itself. Also work with longer term strategy ideas with the customers I support. I bring to that some background. I was actually a Zoom In customer in a previous incarnation, similar to Megan actually. And in that prior role, I'd done a lot of program management work, specifically in the content space. So a lot of enterprise content management discussions and projects that I led over a period of years in a couple of different businesses. So that's kind of who I am. Yeah.
That's great. That'll give us a little bit of context, and I'm sure that'll give you some experiences to draw upon when you ask Colleen some questions today about her topic. And let's go ahead and get started with that.
Okay. Wonderful. So I want to just kind of jump into that, I think, Scott. But
Yeah.
before we get into the questions themselves, Colleen, I wonder if you tell us what you mean by content analytics.
Great first question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, content analytics, it's one of those phrases that I think everyone has some sense of what it means. But not everyone has maybe the exact same definition. And so when we talk to organizations about content analytics, we talk about it as the trails that are left behind by people and machines as content is delivered, discovered, consumed, whatever makes sense for, the particular organization and what their content situation is. But we talk about that data that's left behind by people interacting with content, machines interacting with content, as a big reason why content is an asset. So, we've all heard that phrase, content is an asset, and we really view it as the content and the data together. That is the huge asset. That is magic. And so we have at Content Science kind of a broad view of content analytics. So we include data, especially if it's available at a larger scale, kind of a quantitative scale. We include data like voice of customer data, sentiment, perceptions, comments, questions that people have as they're interacting with content, as much as things like page views or downloads or some of the other metrics you might hear when talking about content analytics. So I take kind of a broad view of what content analytics are, because I think that's really key to making the most of them for decisions.
Yeah, it seems like deciding what to count is part of the challenge, and then what to do with those metrics. So how might we use analytics to inform business decisions if you're a content team? Can you provide an example or some kind of scenario that would help the audience understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of data is super useful for a wide range of decisions, from strategic, what content are we going to keep? What content do we need to do more of because it's performing, really well? Those kinds of decisions, as well as decisions like, do we need to tailor this content better for certain audiences or certain types of customers? Do we need to change some elements of this content to improve performance, or to really make the most of it? Do we need to experiment with changing a headline or changing the image or changing the layout? Are we seeing some signs that this content is promising, but it's not at its full potential, and here's some things we might do to make it reach its full potential? So the great thing about analytics for content is it can inform a wide range of business decisions. And over time, they can inform even higher level business decisions, like getting insights around what your customers or your audiences care about, what they like or don't like, what they're responding to, because that can inform a whole range of marketing decisions, customer success and support decisions, product, prioritization for features. And so if you're, smart about your approach to content analytics, you can get a lot of bang for your buck.
That's really good example. I think one of the challenges people face is knowing what to count. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later. I'm going to pass the baton though to Tom and see what question he has for you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think all of that is really resonating with me, Colleen. It's so cool to hear kind of hear you talk about that. And this may be a little redundant, but I would wonder if you could maybe draw the connection between business success and actionable content analytics. I think you're talking about that a little bit, but I'd love to have those dots really connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had our team at Content Science do some research on that exactly, because we have seen the connection what we really wanted to do is show, correlation, show some good evidence that we could share widely, not have it be specific to a particular client or some confidential information.
Sure.
We couldn't share widely. And we baked this into some research that we do on an ongoing basis around content operations. And I want to share just a visual here, and I'll speak to it briefly. Let's see here. Here we go. So this table here shows a comparison between two groups in this study that we did of content operations, what makes people successful. And in this orange column, you can see that we have people, content professionals and teams at large organizations, a mix of private sector and nonprofit and government. This orange column is those professionals that say, yeah, we on some kind of ongoing basis evaluate content with analytics and other data. We get some kind of understanding of that. And then on the right, we have this blue column where, those professionals report, no, we're not doing that. We're not getting any. And then on the far left here, we have a list of questions that we asked around how content's working in their organization. We use those questions for a lot of different things, but what we were looking for in this breakdown is there a difference? Do teams that collect this kind of data, that use content analytics in some way to evaluate how they're doing, does it make a difference to their other operations? And you can see here that the answer is resoundingly yes. There is a strong correlation between collecting analytics and using them in making content decisions, and things like the amount of bureaucracy teams experience, the way that they make decisions and solve problems, their ability to do that successfully, the recognition and the trust that they have from their organization. And, these are all really important to being able to scale content operations and sustain effective content operations to execute any strategy. And, this is huge. I mean, this proves that, looking at this kind of data is absolutely important to being successful. It's critical path. Otherwise, you're just making decisions in the dark, and no one can be successful that way. So I'm super excited about being able to see this connection between, actually digging into the details of this data, doing the work that goes into it, and having a significant impact on how successful content teams are, and ultimately how successful content is for an organization.
Excellent. So Colleen, I think we'll jump back here to our view so we can all see each other again. Can you give an example of the impact that these kind of performance analytics could have on the organizations that you study? I know that you probably asked them as many probing questions as you could. What did you learn about the impact?
Yeah, so, we did some interviews as part of that study, just to learn a little bit more about how that was actually working or not working. And, basically having data to support and inform conversations was huge to showing impact, communicating impact very clearly, and, over time, gaining trust, gaining the freedom to try some different things. Maybe not everything, worked. There's that freedom to fail and discover some really successful ways of doing content, that freedom to try and experiment a little bit more with content, so that the best possible, most effective approach really could be figured out. And being able to support those kinds of conversations with stakeholders and executives and bosses, made everything from discussing budget and what was it going to take to move things forward, to getting people excited and motivated to support what was happening with content. I mean, if people think, oh yeah, this is going to make a difference, and we have a sense of when that difference or that impact might happen, they're going to be a lot more likely to go to the trouble of supporting what you're doing, or advocating to an executive. So I mean, it just runs the gamut. Everything is easier.
It seems like it even would affect things like hiring decisions and staffing and skills development, because you have measurable analytics you could rely upon.
You can put together some case studies and best practices that you can teach other people, or if you have content partners, whatever your situation is, it's going to be a whole lot easier to onboard people into what you're trying to do and why. If you can identify, these are the things that work, and we know it,
right?
And here's why
we're
not sure about. We might want to try some different stuff, or we might want to close that gap that we have in our understanding. It makes being able to roll with content operations so much easier.
It seems like before we move on, this might be a good time also for Tom to mention to the audience a little bit about the sponsor of our show, the company he works for, Zoom Software. Tom, I know from experience that folks that are bringing their content together with Zoom have some analytical options as well, as far as data is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit about Zoom and what kinds of things that your software can do for content teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So just from a high level, Zoom is what we call a content orchestration platform. And so what we mean by that is, well, here's the scenario, right? So if you have an organization, many organizations, this is a classic enterprise content management problem, have many authoring tools. Maybe they have many content management tools. They have a lot of different types of content. Maybe they've acquired that through acquisitions over time, and all of it, still remains very valuable. What do you do with that? Well, I think historically you'd have to port all that content into a preferred solution, or you'd have to rewrite it, or we don't do that with Zoom In. Instead, we would ingest all of that different content, and we'd apply consistent taxonomy, persistent intelligence around that content. And then from there, from within our content cloud, you're able to expose that through a variety of touch points. So you have the same content that you can put on a portal, for example, one of our most common touch points, but also through like a Salesforce community, you could do that, or maybe you could work with our APIs and just pull that content in other places. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. And as you can imagine, having all of the different kinds of content and all of those different types of touch points, you get a lot of bang for your buck from an analytics perspective. So we do offer our Zoom In Analytics, which does things like we kind of alluded to earlier in the call, the search and the traffic kind of metrics that I think people are very familiar with. But one of the things that we do that I think just echoes so much of what Colleen is saying is we also do content analytics themselves, right? So one of the things you can do, because we know what content our customers have, we can say not only this is what people are looking at, but this is what they're not looking at. Here's the qualities of your content that's not getting attention. Maybe this is brand new and you would expect that it would be getting attention, but it's not. Why is that? And so with our analytics, you can start to really dig into some of those questions.
Excellent. If you've got why questions about your content, definitely check out Zoom In Software. You can learn more about them on the web at zoominsoftware.com. And you can also check the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel today. There's some content in there as well, and some links that will take you directly to the Zoom In website where you can learn more. All right, Colleen, let's get back to the show. What suggestions do you have for organizations that want to improve their content effectiveness? What are some things that we can actually do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to share a couple of insights that we've learned over the years that are based on a lot of the data we've collected through ContentWorks, which is our tool for understanding content effectiveness. And I want to share two insights in particular that kind of lead to two things you can do to really boost your content effectiveness. So let me share a visual here. So first, this is just an overview of 6 elements of content effectiveness or dimensions of content effectiveness. And the better your content can address these 6 elements, the more effective your content is going to be. So super quickly, this is about making content discoverable, easy to discover in a variety of ways. And I'll share an insight in a moment about just how important that is. Having content both be accurate and also give confidence to your customers and users that it is accurate. Polish, making sure the content is at the appropriate or expected level of polish. Are there typos, misspellings, and it's not really in a context where that's forgiven? Is the video, not really up to snuff? Is it difficult to access? Things like that. Usefulness and relevance. So does the content seem like it is going to really help customers or users accomplish their goals or make their decisions? And is the content really tailored to them, relevant to their context, to their situation? And then finally, influence. Does the content make a difference to what customers or users or audiences think, to their decisions, to the actions that they take? And the better content is addressing these 6 dimensions, the more likely it's going to be effective. So in terms of some specifics that you can do to really boost your content effectiveness, I want to share 2 insights and 2 things you can do, essentially. One is to really work on how easy it is to find your content. Now, that might seem simple, but in today's digital world, that is actually complex and it's increasingly difficult to do. And this is a big deal because we increasingly have situations where people might eventually get to the content that you're offering. They might find the content that they're looking for or think that they need after a bit of trouble, after a bit of difficulty, just because there is so much content out there. They are your customers, your users, they're having to navigate more content, more experiences than ever before. So, the possibility that, your customers, your users get to the right content after a bit of struggle, that's going to be more common potentially. And we certainly see it more commonly. And that can really have a negative impact on what your customers and users think about the content itself. So we have found that people's perceptions of content really become distorted if their first impression is, oh my gosh, this is such a pain to get to, or that was really, tough for me to find, or, I'm not sure whether this is exactly what I need, but it seems close enough. If that kind of experience is what really starts them out with your content, they're gonna literally view the content that they try to use as less accurate, less relevant, and less useful. So, this is no longer a case of make your content easy to find because otherwise it might as well not be there. This is make your content easy to find because otherwise it's going to make a lasting bad impression and really make everything else that you do around content less effective. So this is huge. If you've got to prioritize what to work on this. Work on making content easy to discover and find. And then another insight that we have learned over the years around making content effective is the importance of accuracy. And this really ties into the confidence that your customers and users have in your content. And we're finding this is more important than ever today because of all of the misinformation that's really proliferated over the past year, because there are so many different sources of content of varying levels of credibility. So giving your customers and users confidence that your content is accurate is a huge opportunity. When people are confident that the content that they're working with is accurate, they're 2 times more likely to say that, yeah, they accomplished their goal, and 5 times more likely than, and let me back up, they're 2 times more likely to say they accomplished their goal than people who aren't sure whether the content is accurate, 5 times more likely than people who are really thinking that the content is not accurate at all. And it makes sense, if you don't have a lot of clarity that, yes, you can trust this content, you're going to be less likely to act on it or make a decision with it. And, what we found, digging into more of the why behind this is about the cues that your content give to signal, yes, this is up to date, this is accurate, this is current, this is the right version, this is what you should be looking at or focused on. And, this is everything from having a clear source to having clear date of when it was updated to making sure you're identifying the product version that you're talking about to, the level of difficulty to expect. This is, a host of what you might call small content decisions coming together and adding up to a big impact in the confidence that your customers and users have in your content. So those are 2 big ways right now to boost the effectiveness of your content.
That's excellent. Great deep dive there. And you know what it reminds me of? Just common everyday activities. If you were to be invited to go to a restaurant and your first experience was, I can't find a parking space, and the people tell you all you have to do is go over there and park, it's right there at the corner, and you still can't find it, your perception is, this is irritating, I don't want to do this again, somebody park my car, I don't care about that restaurant anymore. And it's a perception. It's not the restaurant's fault. It's how I view those things. And so what I hear you saying is remove the things that are creating the view you don't desire to have of your brand. And bolster the things that are the things that that will improve the value of your brand and that person's perception. It's common sense, but really hard to do, I think, when you wrap your head around it.
I think that's a great point, and a lot of content professionals
Mhm.
try to kind of stay in their lane, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true.
It's some organizations, maybe not all, and that's a broad generalization. But
Sure.
I think this points to you can't just stay in your lane. It's not just about what content you create and deliver. It is about the whole experience, and you
Yeah.
need to get involved in how that content is meeting up with users and
Yeah.
audiences. You've
Mhm.
got to get involved in that and care about it and make sure that it is tight, because it is absolutely going to impact you and how successful your content is.
Yeah.
I love the
Sound
picture.
advice. Go ahead,
I
Tom.
love the picture that this kind of is making in my mind here, Colleen, where you've got kind of this chain of decisions that come out of analytics. And you're monitoring what people are doing, the choices that they're making, their sentiment, and then you're turning that into to actionable business decisions, right? I think that really is so clear to me. And I think what I would love to ask you about is if you have any advice for those content professionals, those content teams who hear this and they think, oh yeah, of course, analytics all the way, but how do I do it? Like they don't know that they have, like maybe they don't think they have what they need. They're not really sure where to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a common scenario. If you are interested in analytics, it's not really, what you studied or what you've really focused on in your career, but you're seeing that, it's more and more important. Or maybe you've had a sample of analytics available to you and you see the value in it and you want more. This is a common scenario. You're not alone if you're kind of in that situation. And I've tried different ways of tackling this with organizations that we've worked with. And what I have found to be the most useful and the least intimidating is to start with questions. And I was really excited because I had a conversation not long ago with Alan Siegel, who I worked with way back at CDC, and he's the vice president of audience development at CNN now. And he sort of validated this approach of start with questions. He said, asking the right questions, really, that's the hardest part of all this. But it's also, the easiest way to get people into it. So you're kind of tackling the hardest thing, but in a way people are comfortable with, kind of an easy way of talking about data at the same time. So I've found this to be really helpful. What are your questions about your content? What would you like to have answered? Now start with that. Don't dive into the data yet. Start with, what do you want to know? And it's okay if you have a sense that, oh, this probably isn't something we can figure out yet, or not sure whether we can get this or not. Don't worry about that. Let's just start with, ideally, what would you like to know about your content? And, ask the questions. And then we find that usually there's some themes, patterns in what the questions are. You might be able to organize them a little bit to make sense for whatever the experience is or the content situation is. And then from there, we can brainstorm, all right, how could we answer these questions? And, in some cases, there's a very clear, obvious answer. If you want to know how many people are engaging with the content, often pretty straightforward answer for that, or way to get that answer. If trying to understand whether the right people are coming to your content, that might be a little bit more complex. You might not know whether you can actually answer that yet. That's okay. And think through, what would really answer the questions. And then from there, we help identify what data points could we get at that would really give specific answers to these questions, and how might we get that data? Is it existing in a tool that we already have, that the client already has? Is it something that could be easily available, but maybe a tool needs to be added, or a setting needs to be changed on an existing
Yeah,
tool?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can even see how this might also be about, is your content prepared in the correct way in order to do that? So let me kind of segue you into this question, because I think you're heading there anyway. In terms of collecting content analytics, do teams that produce structured, kind of granular, modular components of semantically rich content, so intelligent content, the way we speak about it in the technical communication industry, do they enjoy measurement possibilities that may not be so easily available to those who produce unstructured content? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the granularity is really exciting. So, being able to understand what people are doing with a particular component of content that's delivered in multiple screens versus, what are people doing with a particular page.
Mhm.
That's a big difference in terms of what you can learn from those analytics. When you have a component level view, you can understand, you know, whether people are really interacting with that component at all,
Right.
as well as what placement of that component is performing best. Lots of different insights that you could gain there. And you can get better micro engagements, most likely, from more of a component view. So you can understand what within that component people clicked on or highlighted or
Yeah.
scrolled through, or and just get a real detailed sense of how people are engaging, which can inform a lot of optimization decisions, a lot of very detailed content decisions, which I find content professionals really benefit from the most. And
Sure.
those things add up to bigger business, insights. But content professionals really, in order to best use data to make very specific decisions, really benefit from this additional detail that you could get from that component breakdown.
Excellent. It sounds like the restaurant example is pertinent here too. Knowing how many people came into the restaurant is one thing, but knowing how many people order a specific item on the menu and what time of day is that more popular, during the early hours or the later hours, could definitely help the staff, help them with staffing and all kinds of decisions that they would need to do to run the restaurant better. And I think you're saying the same thing here. The more that we can isolate these metrics and make meaning of them, the better that we are at making predictions about what we could do in the future to improve our business. And for those of you who are watching the show and you haven't asked Colleen a question yet, you still have a couple minutes left to do so. You can click Ask a Questions tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel and submit a text-based question. And speaking of that, Tom, if you can see the questions in the submission area there's one in there. I think you might want to read that one for the audience, and we'll see if any other questions come in for Colleen as well.
Yeah, happy to. So here's the question, Colleen. My company has data on online help topics, such as the number of views. So we have the data, but the struggle is in interpreting it. Why did views go down on a certain topic? Did it get easier to use in the product, so there's no need to look for help? Is no one using that feature anymore? Did our table of contents change make it too hard to find?
Yeah, that is a really insightful question that really gets at, the possibilities and limitations of this data. And, we find that the typical analytics like page views are a useful part of getting content intelligence, and a nice understanding of what's going on with your content. But you really need other data points, like that voice of customer data I mentioned at the beginning, to complete the story, to complete the view of what's going on with content. So, in that case, you could look at things like comments and inquiries. You could implement an ongoing kind of survey or poll or evaluation, and get more context as to why page views are going up or down. And that really is key. And we're seeing this across different contexts, certainly support, but also even in marketing. A couple of years ago, the analytics firm of the year selected by American Marketing Association said that the textual data, meaning people's comments, people's feedback, that was the real gold in terms of the data. And this was the analytics firm of the year.
Wow.
So they recognize the importance of having that kind of data combined with, the more traditional analytics to really get a full context of what's going on.
I got a question submitted to me as well that asks you, can analytics misinform us? And if so, does something dawn on you as an example that you might be able to share there, since that was a kind of a surprise question?
Yeah, absolutely. So for similar reasons that we were just talking about, analytics, if you think about just behavioral analytics alone, they can misinform you. So we worked not long ago with American Cancer Society and getting some understanding of what was going on with their content for a variety of reasons. And we found many examples of content with very high traffic, also very high bounce rate. And that could mean the content is very quickly meeting people's needs. People don't need to go further. And this could be a good thing. Or that could mean this content isn't matching their expectations whatsoever. And in fact, it's so bad that they're just going elsewhere. They're not even going to try to re-engage or go further in the site. And it wasn't until we implemented some mechanisms of feedback for voice of customer and used that data to fill in the gap that we understood the situation was more of the latter. It's more of a case of this content isn't meeting people's expectations. We got more understanding about why, and we were able to help them do things like segment content better for audiences. So yeah, absolutely, analytics can misinform, because you could have misinterpreted that as, this is great, people are really finding this content easily, lots of people coming to see it, they're getting what they need quickly and leaving. You could have interpreted it that way.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I saw somebody who saw a giant spike in traffic and they attributed it to some content that they had just released, which was nonsense. They had actually no way of knowing whether that was the case or not. When they asked the IT department, or the IT department representative was involved in the meeting, and he said, "Really? So do you know if those were people?"
Exactly.
And nobody in the staff, they were like, "What do you mean? Of course they were people, computers, people." And he was like, "No." Sometimes they can point bots at our site, and they do it all the time, and they're like probing, and they're landing on your page because you just advertised it somewhere. It was the easy page for them to see. So maybe that's going on too. And it turned out that there was some hanky-panky going on with the metrics, but it was not human beings, as the marketing department had hoped, that were banging on the site. And when they tried to discern why are they only staying for a second, the IT department had to tell them that's because it's just as long as the bot needed to be there to do whatever it was trying to do. It was not a person trying to read your content, and they weren't trying to play your videos or sign up for your newsletter. They were just doing whatever they were doing. So I think that's important to know. Did you involve, when you talk to people, do you find that when you're talking about analytics, you have to involve more than just content people? since so many content people are word people, they don't often play in the numbers area?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it depends organization to organization, but sometimes it's a customer experience or user experience, marketing, customer success. Sometimes there's business intelligence groups or, analytics groups, and involving them absolutely can be helpful for everything from correctly interpreting, the available data to discussing how could we change what's tracked a little bit in order to really capture what is valuable for the decisions we're trying to make. So yeah, having that broader team involved when possible can be really helpful.
Let's be mindful of the time that we have available. Colleen, are you still available for a couple more minutes? We've got a couple questions from the audience. We'll try to slide in if you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Tom, why don't you tackle the first one?
Great. So, Colleen, is it possible to really predict that a particular website page can attract a specific range of traffic? How much or how specific can we get with content metrics? This is specifically in the marketing world, but I think, it might be an open question, for different types of content too. How specific?
Yeah. So, I think the more data that you have available to you to see patterns over time, the better you'll be able to predict what's going to happen when you make a particular content decision or release some new content. So that is the value in taking a long-term approach to content analytics, as opposed to, I just need it for this project, or I just need it for this, little decision, which is what we often see. So thinking about content analytics more as a system and less of, a bunch of ad hoc one-off efforts is super valuable to getting to the level of prediction.
Yeah.
And what was the second part of the question?
The second part, I think, had to do with how specific you can get. And so I can read that one again. How specific can we get with content metrics? And the question was specifically related to marketing, but I think technical communication, you would have, kind of going back to some of the structured content we were talking about earlier, I think that really fits in with kind of any kind of content, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that marketing has a lot of opportunity to leverage what's been learned in technical communication around using content components. And I think something that would be really compelling to them is compelling to marketing is understanding how specific the content metrics can get. But content metrics can get super specific, like what did people highlight? How far did they scroll on a page or screen? What exactly did they click on besides buttons?
Right.
You can get very, very, very specific with content metrics. And then another angle on being specific that I think is particularly compelling for marketing is correlation. So, as you get nice data over time, and over time with some of these specific data points we're talking about, these micro engagements, if you're an enterprise, you could get lots of data around those very specific metrics, even though on a particular day it might not be much. But then you can start to see correlations between, these elements of content correlate to this result. So for example, we recently worked with a large home improvement organization to do those kinds of correlations to identify very precisely what was the most successful content in terms of search visibility, attracting organic traffic, attribution to revenue, and overall value. We got very precise, and we could use that to then change templates, to change requirements for the set of content that we were looking at, so that you could then scale, the best in class of your content. So yeah, that getting granular like that is possible, and it's also powerful.
Yeah, and the precision is based on the approach too, right? Like I think a lot of people just assume because we're sitting here on computers today that they can just push a button on a computer and get all the metrics they want.
Yeah.
But you and I know there are other ways to do it. I mean, I just interviewed somebody from Nielsen Norman Group who did a recap of 31 years of online eye tracking studies, where they were actually watching human eye behavior while they land on a web page, and they sit people down and they basically say, we're going to send you, we're going to sit you in front of a computer. You're going to follow these simple instructions. It's something like turn it on, launch the browser, point the browser at this website, and then find the interest rate at which the mortgage company will loan you the money. It's a mortgage company website. And of course, you expect people will read until they find the 17% or 15% or 5% or whatever it is, but they do not. They jump all over the screen. They don't have any rhyme or reason. And then the people who create the content are watching these studies and they say, wait a minute, those people aren't reading it. I told them the first thing they need to do, the second, the third, in order. I want them to read it in order. But now that we know that that's not a thing, we need to be able to move our content around, right? And not just abide by the rules that we were taught when we were in school. We need to use this data to decide, should we break the rules we were taught in order to serve the needs of the audience? But I also think that we're going to see technology jump by leaps and bounds. I mean, the whole fact that these cameras are on our faces, they're probably going to be able to try to figure out how to use eye tracking using our own camera. That would give us great insights into the individual users. But before we go, we're almost out of time. Tom, do you want to pick one more question for Colleen to answer?
Yeah, sure. So, Colleen, there's a question here about your book. And so it says, do you have articles or a section of your book that drill down on the dimensions of content effectiveness and how to improve these dimensions of your content?
Yes, absolutely. The Content Advantage book has a very comprehensive breakdown, as well as a lot of examples and tips for boosting your effectiveness in each of those 6 areas. And then throughout the book, use some data that and insight that we've learned in studying those elements of content effectiveness. So, that's also throughout the book. But there is an entire chapter on making content effective. It's a comprehensive chapter that has lots of good examples and techniques in there.
And could you tell us again the name of your book so that people who want to keyword search it, I'm sure you're all firing up Amazon or Google right now. What is the name of your book?
Yes. So the title is The Content Advantage, and the subtitle is The Science. Oh, actually, let me make sure that I use the correct title. The correct subtitle, because we did a modification to it, but it is The Science of Succeeding at Digital Business Through Effective Content.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, I think that's going to have to be one of our last words here today. So I'd like to thank all the audience members for joining us, and thank Tom DeBeauchamp for filling in for Megan Gahuli. Did a great job. And for Colleen for making time to be on the show. We really appreciate it a lot. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed by all the possibilities with these numbers. So thanks for bringing that to light.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you both. And here's to content and numbers.
Yes, content and numbers.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for having me. And before you sign off, just we would love it if you would let us know what you thought of today's show. So please use the Rate This tab located in the webinar viewing panel and give us a 1 through 5 stars and let us know why you made your selection with a comment.
Excellent. And before you go, I'm going to encourage you to look into your inbox in the next few days for an invitation to the next Content Advantage show. That'll take place Tuesday, May 11th. We're going to chat with Nadav Levy about digital content accessibility. Levy will make the business case for making your digital content accessible, and he'll include why your organizations should invest in it and who you're leaving behind if you're not doing that. He'll also introduce you to a few free tools that you can use to detect web accessibility gaps, and you'll learn how getting digital accessibility right can help you attract and retain new customers. Yeah, I'm sure you'll be super excited to also know that we're going to follow up with another one. Let me show you one more thing before we go. We've got a follow-up show May 25th, why you need an enterprise intelligent content delivery strategy. This is with a great content professional who is super knowledgeable named Mike Ian Tosca. He's going to come and talk to us about how intelligent content supply chains can in fact impact the role of content delivery. It seems like a kind of esoteric subject, but I'm going to tell you this guy's super interesting and knows his stuff. You'll have a great show, and I encourage you to sign up for that as soon as you can. All right, well, without further ado, thanks for joining us for the Content Advantage Talk Show today. I appreciate it. We'll see you again at a show in the future. Be well. Keep doing great work. Bye-bye.
Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.